Are you always coming up with ideas? Do you marvel at successful business owners? Do you hate being told what to do? Ever take things apart just to see how they work? Are you a dreamer? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Enclave with Kevin Wortham, the podcast that focuses on building, maintaining, pivoting, planning, and investing in you, the entrepreneur. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Pro Tapes and Specialties is the world leader in tape manufacturing and specialty conversion with over 40 years of experience. In addition to our Pro brand of high-quality specialty adhesive tapes, we provide contract converting services that help improve your profitability, streamline your supply chain, and reduce inventory cost. We offer the most complete range of converting capabilities in the industry, such as cloth tape, double-coated tape, specialty tape, paper tape, masking tape,
vinyl tape, carton sealing tape, adhesive transfer tape, duct tape, foam tape, electrical tape, filament tape, foil tape, reflective tape.
And the tape just keeps on rolling. Visit us online today at www.protapes.com or call us at 800-345-0234. Pro Tapes, it's just how we roll.
Welcome to another fantastic episode of the Entrepreneurial Enclave, Life's Coming Attraction. I am your host, Kevin Wortham. So listen, when I started the platform, it was to give an unabridged voice to entrepreneurs so they can tell their unabridged story. But today we're doing something different, still within the entrepreneurial mindset, but we're talking about the intrapreneur, what you do within a company. And so this young lady, we have been friends for years. Our parents used to hang out together. We used to attend the same church. So when I heard about the wonderful, awesome work that she was doing, I said, I have got to change the rules slightly to have my dear friend on the platform to talk about all the great work that she's doing. Welcome to the platform, DeAnna Minus-Vincent. How are you this afternoon?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me, Kevin.
And you are first, so I want you to give yourself a hand clap for that one. Okay, so I know we've got a hard stop, but you've got a lot to talk about. So let's talk about just briefly growing up in Asbury, right? How was that growing up in a Methodist church in an urban town?
It was definitely a grounding of sorts.
Yes.
You definitely had community.
Yes.
My parents were very active in youth group and my dad in the choir. And then I worked in as a camp counselor and later
Yes.
the camp director,
Yes.
also overseeing the youth group. So I think being in a community of like-minded individuals really grounds you and keeps you closely in touch with reality.
And some part of that is missing right now. We have the churches showing some prominence, but a lot of them don't want to stake their claim like we used to do old school. But that's okay.
Agreed.
We're going to change that. So then you move on to high school. You go to Notre Dame High School. What was the reason for going to Notre Dame at that time for you and your family, I guess?
Sure. Well, I had been at Stewart Country Day School, which is an all-girls school in Princeton, and I graduated the 8th grade at the same time my sister graduated from high school.
Yes.
And in my young mind, I just didn't really know how my parents were going to afford the University of Pennsylvania and Stewart Country Day School. And I thought about where I might want to go. I had never been to public school, and I thought about Notre Dame, even though it was huge in comparison to Stewart. I mean, we had 25 girls in our class and to go to 400 and plus boys,
Yeah.
that was something really new. But I do think that just the diversity in the space allowed me to thrive and learn new skill sets.
Yes. So you're at Notre Dame. How was that exposure for you with the boys and just dealing with some of those issues that they were bringing to you from the community?
I think the change was big. I mean, boys, I learned probably some things that I didn't know at Stewart. I thought boys were end all be all. And then when I got to Notre Dame, I was like, yeah, You're just okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Just big knuckleheads. That's all. We big knuckleheads.
Right,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it did give me a network that I still stay connected to. I think the role that you played, even though you might be 1 or 2 years older than me, Kevin, but in looking back and helping to coordinate BAS,
Yes.
so Blacks Acclimating Towards Social Success,
Yes.
it helped to build a community that I'm still connected to.
Well, and first of all, thank you for remembering the acronym, because I was going to say, I hope she doesn't quiz me on the acronym, because I think I forget every now and then, but thank you. So yeah, so we graduate from Notre Dame, and I can say we because I'm also an alumni. And so then you go on to, which college do you go on at that point?
So I went to Drexel University
Yes.
with a major in accounting and a minor in corporate communications. And because I didn't want to leave too far from home,
Yes.
and my sister had just graduated from Penn, and I quickly found out that that was not the pathway for me.
Okay.
While I excelled at Notre Dame in accounting, I participated in both the Honor Society and National Business Honor Society and got an actual scholarship for accounting. When I got there, I was like, I do not want to do credits and debits for the rest of my life.
Yes.
So I then changed total focus. I became a sociology major, and I transferred to Morgan State University, HBCU,
Yes.
where my family was deeply entrenched. My mom went there, a lot of her sisters, my uncle, a cousin, and she also was imprisoned while she was there in '63 for integrating a movie theater. All the jails were full, and she was put in prison for 5 days. So I felt a real kinship to Morgan.
I never knew that.
Yeah, she
Wow.
actually, Morgan gave her an honorary doctorate in 2014 for being a freedom fighter, and but the whole hose down with lie and going to prison, and now Morgan owns that shopping center and built its business school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, that's fantastic. But I mean, it's fantastic that you receive such accolades, but sorry that you had to go through all of that. Wow, that's crazy.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. So
Yep.
so man, we're almost coming full circle. You're going from a predominantly white school to now a predominantly African American school. How was that for you?
That was truly eye-opening because
Yes.
although I grew up in the heart of Trenton,
Yes.
normally by the time I got home from school, it was too late to play outside. So a lot of my friends were white, and it was just eye-opening. But I think there was a certain level of caring that was different. The professors, they cared. At the time, it may have seemed a little paternalistic,
Yes.
but looking back, it was real care. You know, Drexel, and not to say anything derogatory, but, you know, whether I got to class, that was my responsibility. But at Morgan, someone was looking for you to come
Yes.
to class. I had one professor who was also my mom's older sister's professor.
Yes.
And she must have been 100 when I was there, but she told me she was a linguist.
Yes.
And she really stayed on us. And I think just the experience was something I wouldn't trade for anything.
Wow. Wow. Now, how often do you go back, you know, in remembrance of your mother, or how often do you go back just for alumni activities or weekends?
Right. So my mom and her sisters went to homecoming every year. So as a kid, we went to homecoming every year.
Okay.
And then I continued to go to a few homecomings, not as loyal as they were, but in the past year, after losing my mom
Yes.
in June, I felt a little guilty. You know, she was a lifetime member of the Alumni Association, so I fulfilled my lifetime membership. I've been back on campus.
Yes.
Campus has definitely changed. Morgan has probably grown just astronomically.
Yes.
And they are just a leader in the engineering space and the business space and soon to be the medical space. So I am just proud to be a Morgan alum.
Awesome. Awesome. So now let's do a drum roll and let's talk about where you are now and what brings you to this platform, because I know I want to save the rest of the time just to give that to you.
Sure. So let me just kind of tell you how I got back to New Jersey.
Yes,
So
okay,
I graduated from Morgan, and I tried to stay in Baltimore for a couple of years, and I was home one weekend at and visiting my mom at Trenton High, where she was a teacher, and I met the love of my life. And we went out twice that weekend, and 2 weeks later, I moved back to Trenton to be with him, and I've never spent more than 2 nights away from him in my entire existence. From the time we met to the time we married was 9 months. So he brought me back to Trenton, and then we both pursued our master's degrees. I pursued mine at Rutgers and got a master's of public administration, and then we started a family. We have one daughter.
Yes.
Who's about to graduate from college, and I'm also pursuing my doctorate in business administration right now.
What? Congratulations! That's awesome. That's awesome,
Thank
Doc.
you.
So we're going to just put that in the atmosphere. Awesome. Congratulations, doctor. That's all right. Go ahead.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Yes.
So then when I first came back to Trenton, I worked for the city of Trenton, and I worked in substance abuse programming as well as maternal child health. So really looking at where women in Trenton could receive better health outcomes for them and their babies. And then that program moved to one of the regional entities in the state, and I pursued that. And a big passion of mine was around Black infant mortality.
Yes.
I sat on the governor's, at the time, Christy Todd Whitman's first Blue Ribbon panel on Black infant mortality. And that was the first time it really clicked for me, the intersection between equity and health outcomes and how systemic racism plays a role. And at the time, although I had everything going for me, my husband was gainfully employed, as was I, we lost our first baby. And that just showed me kind of how discrimination plays into health outcomes. And so that was really eye-opening. I did not stay in maternal child health, although it was a true passion of mine, but I felt as a generalist, I didn't want to get pigeonholed too quickly. So I was tapped on the shoulder by then Governor McGreevy's administration to come to Trenton and oversee what I call the softer side of housing. So building playgrounds, renovating homes,
Yes.
thinking about weatherizing and heating people's homes and things like that. So that was very interesting and a learning time for me. I then did a quick foray into education at Thomas Edison State College and also the school that I went to, Stewart Country Day School, where I oversaw fundraising and was very successful there. But then I wanted to kind of get back to my roots to really move communities forward. And I went into Philadelphia at what was then a small nonprofit that only served seniors in Philadelphia that used big data to help low-income people access public benefits over the phone. It was started by a gentleman who gained his wealth in the credit card industry. So it was the credit card industry flipped on its head for social good.
Wow.
And when I got there, we were 20 in size and just Philadelphia. And by the time I left, we were in 8 states helping individuals across the age spectrum with over 20 social service benefits over the phone. So really helping to improve access for people, not sending them to 10 different agencies, but helping them do it in one call and then us helping to facilitate. So that was a big part of my career. And then I came to my current location.
Yes.
I'm at RWJ Barnabas Health, which is the largest healthcare system in the state of New Jersey and the biggest employer in the state. And I initially came to oversee their housing efforts to really write the strategy for the social impact and community investment practice, and then also integrate social factors into the clinical setting. So with the understanding that you can't take a asthmatic child who comes to the emergency room and just give them a inhaler or
Yes.
a nebulizer treatment. You also have to ask, what does your house look like? You know, is it rodent infested? Is it dusty?
Yes.
And how can we get that clean? We need to ask them all the questions. So really building that into all clinical care for all people to prevent bias and stigma. And then in 2020, I was tapped on the shoulder by the CEO to end systemic racism
Wow.
for the system.
Wow.
And yeah, wow. Wow. So even though we had a active diversity, equity, and inclusion practice, we had the social impact practice, he knew that, you know, while race and racism is important to me, being a woman of color in America and growing up in inner city, my background was in changing organizations. And so really creating a strategic blueprint for how the system responded for its patients, its workforce, its communities, and its operations,
Yes.
and putting hard metrics around it and holding people accountable. So for those of us on a bonus structure, our bonuses are held accountable to ending racism.
Okay. How's that going so far?
My dad teases me, and every week he says, "Have you ended racism yet this week?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Of course, that's next week."
That's next week.
But I think we have made huge strides, even things such as for our patients. We looked at healthcare disparities. We looked at what kind of technology is important for people of all skin colors, because at the time with artificial intelligence and some of the technology, it only reads dark skin some ways and then white skin different ways, which then can cause health disparities. So we only purchase those machines that are equitable. We
Time out.
Mm-hmm.
Is this like your comedy shtick right here? You mean to tell me that through artificial intelligence, there's a machine that can tell whether you're black or white, and your company only purchases the ones that are truly color sensitive?
Equitable?
Yeah.
Equitable. So there's lots. So the
What?
pulse oximeters that manage breathing, especially were enhanced during COVID.
Yes.
They needed to be recalibrated for people of color, but not everyone's going to take that step. So we wanted to make sure that step wasn't reliant on people, but we were only purchasing those that read all skin tones the same. The same as, not in the health field, but when you think about automatic water dispensers or automatic sinks.
Yes.
They read darker skin the same way, differently than they read white skin, and they come on quicker. So it's things like that we wanted to really push the envelope on and make sure that we were taking bias out by building in the systems that will change that, because not everyone cares about black and white.
Well, first of all, I am so glad you're on the show, because I never thought of that. Wow. Thank God you're at the forefront. So I'm going to be like your father. I'm going to call you every week. Did you end racism? But you can say, no, Dad, but we are certainly getting closer. What? Never knew that. I am so glad you're my friend, part of the church family, and you're moving this forward. That's crazy. Wow. Continue, please. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. So we also looked at our workforce. So
Yes.
what issues were they having, from things such as patients throwing mugs full of urine and saying, "I don't want this black so-and-so," or "I want someone who speaks English," if it was someone with a thick accent.
Yes.
So we instituted policies that say none of our patients can choose their care providers, everything from dietary up to nurses, on the basis of physical attributes, except for gender for religious purposes.
Yes.
So just putting that policy in place, looking at how we contract. We're an anti-racist organization. We want to contract with entities that are also anti-racist. So we built boilerplate language into all of our contracts that says that, and then ask people, what does your workforce look like? What does your board look like? And we're fine if the composition today is homogenous, but next year when you want a contract amendment, it needs to look different.
Yes.
Unless you are a family-owned business and have less than 5 employees. And I am so pleased to say that since last year, when we first started implementing this, 98% of all of our contracts have equity language in them, in whole or in part.
Wow.
And as the biggest employer in the state, that is a really powerful number.
Now, you guys are bigger than Johnson & Johnson?
In the state, we're a bigger employer for state employees. We have 44,000 in our workforce.
Wow. And the CEO tapped you personally to oversee this new work that you're doing now.
He did. And
Awesome.
I think he knew that I was going to be very data driven. As a woman of color, I know it can't be because DeAnna says so. It's more, this is evidence based. This
Yes.
is data driven. This is what a process looks like for us to do this, because, people of color are questioned and women are questioned even more.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to make sure it was airtight, it was data driven, and metrics were applied. I'm a huge believer that if you don't measure, it doesn't matter.
Wow. Thank you. Wow. Continue. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
So we had been, we kicked this off in December of 2020, and then we spent the whole first year just gathering data, over 260 focus groups, looking at patient data, looking at employee data in order to write the strategic plan. And implementation started last January. And then my life took a little bit of a change. I had a routine surgery in April.
Yes.
Where I had gotten cardiac clearance because my mom had heart disease. My grandmother died of heart disease. And they told me there was some irregularity, but not to worry.
Yes.
So I went through a 6-hour surgery. And then on May 7th of last year, Mother's Day, my daughter sent flowers and I thought I was allergic. And my neck seized up and I went to the emergency room. They were about to send me home. And just by the grace of God and divine intervention, a cardiologist was doing early morning rounds. And he came in and he listened to me because I don't know if you know this, but Black women and Black people are historically dismissed in healthcare.
Yes.
So I went in and he listened to my family history and he said, something's not right with you. And I called my cardiologist and she said, he's overreacting. Just see me next week. But luckily my husband he was not for that and nor was I. And they took me in and they called in a cardiac catheterization team and I was 95% blocked in my left main artery.
Wow.
And so I spent a week in ICU and, but that same day, May 7th, also changed my life because my mother was diagnosed with COVID.
Wow.
And she, having had lung disease, she had heart disease, she had autoimmune disease, and it was 2 weeks before they put her in the hospital. But when they did, her care was not, it left something to be desired. She was fearful, and I told you she had been in prison, so that's kind of her lived and learned experience. But when she felt she was being inequitably treated, and she took pictures of herself in her own bodily fluids, they sent a sheriff to her bedside to delete the pictures.
Wow.
And my mom was 5'3" and 125, 30 pounds. And when you look at her progress, and she sent me text messages that night that said, baby girl, I am so afraid. Please move me. And she sent me every piece of identification she could think of, I guess.
Yes. And
then when we looked at her, her progress notes, it was 12 hours from the time the sheriff came and threatened to do not resuscitate bracelet on her arm that she went delirious and went into medical ICU, and we refused to eat, and we did not see her as herself again until 3 days prior to her death. And that just has led me to think about, the mind-body connection and also how much this work that I'm doing really matters and people need to hear. There's two things that my message is clear on. One, be an advocate for your own health.
Yes.
Do not allow people to tell you what your body feels like. You have been the steward of this body for a lifetime.
Yes.
And number two, on the day that she died, that morning, she was making the clinicians laugh and told them that she was fine. So another thing that I really need to impart to people, and that my sister implored me to get across to people, is that particularly women and women of color, it is fine not to be fine.
Yes.
And we need to be okay with speaking up about it and saying, I need help. So I know that was a really long description, but that's a little bit about who I am.
No, this was fantastic. I just want to back up for a second because as you know, my mother is in age right now, and I'm going through some of the same challenges with my mother being in a nursing facility and just sensing that she's not getting the best possible care. And so I lay awake at night and I'm saying, I've got to do something. How do I move this forward? Because, every time I go, it's like, where are the people of color taking care of our people? That whole industry is, there's very few men or women of African, that are African American. You get the other folk that's supposed to be our brethren, but I don't think they seemingly care to the degree that I would want them to care about my mother and for other folks trying to receive that whole. So we've got to do something with the social inequities within the nursing care facility. So, man, I don't know. I'm open for suggestions, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we've done, because, clinicians of color, Black clinicians represent 5% of all doctors coming out of medical school.
Yes.
And then when you boil that down to African Americans, it becomes even less.
Yes.
And so what we've been and we know that race concordance and cultural concordance and language concordance matter in people's health outcomes. We feel more comfortable. We want to ask more questions. We feel, simpatico. And so the other thing that we've tried to do, with the understanding that we have to work on getting more people of color into the medical field, but also for the people who are there,
yes,
we need you to check your biases, and we need to teach you how to do that. So we've implemented mandated training for everyone across the system, and interactive. So you can't go to the end and click. It can't be a checkbox. It's about, what are microaggressions? How are you an ally? How do you speak up for someone when you see a microaggression? Even things as simple as moving the conversation. Like, you can't talk about it in really broad terms without giving people concrete steps. So, for instance, one of the things we implemented was say this, not that. And it's words that are rooted in racist etymology, such as blacklist,
yes,
white label, chop, chop. I used to always say to my team, chop, chop.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was racist.
Got you.
And so how do we change those things? And how do we learn to have open, honest dialogue and close the power dynamic, and then also speak up for others who may not be able to speak up for themselves at that moment?
Yes.
And that is how we're going to move the needle. And I think even for patients and their families to understand and close the power dynamic, to be okay with checking a doctor and say, this is what I read, this is what I heard, especially, and I implore you, Kevin, for our mothers. Like,
yes.
The 37 miles from where she was at to the hospital she wanted to get to haunts me. And although she was too weak to be moved, I just think about, could I have done more? How could I have spoken up? How can I speak up for myself? And I think even since I've been on this journey, women especially write to me all the time and say, I felt the pain and I went and got it checked out and I wasn't satisfied, so I moved on. And I just feel like one of my mother's favorite songs was, if I can help somebody, then my living would not be in vain. And I feel like even if I can help a few
yes.
to speak up and
yes.
be an advocate for themselves and their families.
Now, I just want to take a break real quick and just ask this question. So how come we don't have more Black-owned or Black-led nursing facilities or care facilities or compassionate care facilities?
I think it comes down to economics and hard to break in. I think it's people may want to do it, but until people are open to seeing people who don't look like them. I mean, I think the same reason why a lot of corporate CEOs are white males, because we all feel comfort in ourselves and therefore choosing people who look like us.
Okay, gotcha.
Like, I'm going to have a natural inclination, whether bad or not, to women of color. And I see them as the next powerhouses. And I think the same is true for white men and everyone else. That's our natural proclivity. But we need to think outside the box and say, who is the best? How can we create diversity? How can we create an inclusive environment? And how do we give people the tools to invest and own and succeed
yes.
at care facilities?
Yes. Because most of them tend to be Jewish owned or Jewish facilitated. And
I think
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Some are, and some are white. Some are parts of huge corporations and may not put may not think about truly equitable solutions for even just the day-to-day running. And I think we could do a better job at that. And
I would agree, because, oh my God, that's a whole nother podcast that I'm going to invite you back on to talk about. But continue. So continue. So in essence, they got you just in time as you were going through a mild or severe heart attack.
Yeah, it was pretty severe. I mean,
yeah.
I was 95% blocked, as I said, in my left main artery.
Yeah,
And
that would be severe.
I just thank God. Like I had been telling I told my cardiologist, I said, my arm gets a little tingly and hurts, and my blood pressure's been rising. And she said, no, your blood pressure's fine. It's 120 over 70, which 120 over 80 is average for people. But I think where we also need to move towards is looking at the whole health of every individual.
Yes.
My average baseline had historically been 86 over 68. So as I was getting older, in the past 2 years, it was rising. So you need to know that in order to know that it's not normal for me.
Yes.
And then to take the progressive steps. But if we're measuring people against one another and not looking at them in a patient or person-centered way, then we won't be able to really close those gaps.
Wow. So having said that, having heard that, what is your movement now? Are you trying to encourage more women to check on their heart? Are you asking them to be heart healthy? Are you doing, that kind of work outside of work?
Yeah, so I do that work outside of work. Last year, I was a woman of impact for the American Heart Association because of my job at RWJ Barnabas.
Yes.
And at the time, I was touting that my grandmother died and my mother was doing great, and really talking about it from an equity standpoint. Little did I know a year later I would have a heart attack. But I do thank the American Heart Association for so I knew the signs. I knew that, pain in my arm, pain down, because women do not have heart attacks the same as men. It's not, or as you see on television, it's not, falling out and touching your chest. They're a little more silent. So it was pain under my underarm and radiating around my back.
Yes.
So really knowing that, hey, I could be having an incident. So it is really about letting people know that. But I think in totality, there's two things that I think are my charge and where I can influence the system is looking at every patient, regardless of what their disease is, as an individual, making sure that we're addressing their clinical, social, behavioral, and economic issues to make sure they can make it to their appointment, to make sure that they're getting the mental health they need, make sure that they're getting everything and that we're looking at them as individuals. The second piece is re-engineering how services and supports are delivered in healthcare. So making sure that the housing community is talking to the health community, and the housing people are talking to the food providers, and so that it becomes one deep continuum.
Yes.
To really re-engineer a fractured system. Because if we don't give people all of the support they need, they're not going to concentrate here. I mean, and I have everything I need. My husband works for the state. I have great health insurance. I have a loving family, and I still had these issues.
Yes.
I was 120 pounds overweight. I had bad asthma. So all of those things. And then to overlay poverty on top of that,
Yes.
we have to make sure that we're having people think about their health by removing some of those barriers.
Yes. Wow. Man, this has been fantastic. What? Now,
Thank you.
What, man, you listen, are you a sought after speaker? Because this was so fantastic.
I do speak nationally because what we've built at RWJBH, my team and I,
Yes.
around systemic racism and the social determinants of health, they've become premiers in the healthcare space.
Yes.
So I go a lot to either speak, to tell other healthcare systems how to do it and the tangible steps to get there, but then also just to talk about how we can work together to re-engineer the work that we do.
Wow. Man. I am lost for words, and that's hard for me to become speechless, but I'm so excited for you. I'm so proud of you. Wow. And I just keep thinking, and I wanna end on a serious note, and I guess a funny note. Were you in the Asbury Youth Choir? Were you ever in the Asbury Youth Choir?
I was for a short time, but
Okay.
if you've ever heard me sing, even God doesn't want me to sing at church.
Got
He's
you.
like, mouth the word. Mouth the word.
And so to see you, wow, come from that to this is nothing but God's blessing. I am so excited for you. Man, you know, I'm being selfish right now. I would love for you to come back on this platform, and I would really love for you and I to talk about the inequities and how we can change that around, and how I can become more advocate for people in the nursing home or the caregiving space, because that is really a challenge for me, because I always have to bite my tongue when I go into that space, because it just feels like, and you know how you say sometimes you just feel like things are not right, and you know, and I know that, you know, because my mother suffered a stroke, and so it's difficult. It's very challenging for her to really speak, and my mother really enjoyed talking. So I know if she's having difficulty speaking, and then you've got a different accent, I know my mother is having challenges trying to hear and understand what you're saying. And but the administrators don't seem to have a problem with that. To me, that's a problem. And I try not to say that too loud, because I want them to give care to my mother. But
That is such a balancing act. But I think, and I hear my mother in my ear, it's not what we say, it's how we say it.
Yes.
And I encourage you not to bite your tongue.
Yes.
She is one of the most important people that's ever been in your life. And
Absolutely.
if we don't speak up for ourselves and those who we love,
Yes.
then nobody's going to do it for us. And we have to push people to think differently. Like ask them, is this the best practice? Is there something else we can be doing?
Yes.
It seems as if she's not comfortable. How can we make her comfortable and really think through those strategies? But I would welcome the opportunity to come back and to speak with you more.
Yes. Yes. Listen, now I know that I'm going to ask you for your bio, and I'm going to ask you for your headshot, but how can people reach out to you if they want to stay connected to you? Are you on Facebook? Are you on Instagram? That kind of stuff.
I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Yes.
DeAnna Minus-Vincent. I don't have any fancy names.
Okay.
I'm not that original. So feel free to reach out. And I am a huge advocate for mentoring and having conversations and trying to get the word out. So I am open to having any conversation that you or anyone else wants me to have.
Well, I mean, you were the first. You knocked it out of the park by having entrepreneurs be on an entrepreneurial platform. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So listen, if there's other entrepreneurs out there, DeAnna has risen the bar high for you. So come correct. You were fantastic. Any parting words you want to give to the listening audience?
I guess I would say just be true to yourself and be true to your family, and think about innovative ways to move the system forward. I'm driven by the fact that I want to make sure that one day when I have grandchildren, I've left the world better than when I got here, and my grandchildren don't have to fight the same fights that I fought, that my mother fought, that my dad fought. So just be driven, find your passion, and move it in whatever way you know how.
Wow. DeAnna, thank you so much. Listen,
Thank you.
Let's stay connected. Oh my God, I am so excited for you. I love the work that you're doing. Oh my God, there's so many things that when you come back the next time that we can talk about. One of the things that struck me as very interesting and exciting was the social injustice and inequities within the AI region. I had no idea about the machines, how they read us differently.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I welcome that opportunity, and I just say continue to pray for me. I mean, ending systemic racism is no easy path.
I can imagine, but I'm so glad that you're at the forefront and keep accepting those phone calls from your father. Tell him, not yet, Daddy, but I'm getting closer to ending racism.
Definitely.
DeAnna, thank you. You have been fantastic. Let's talk and text later on.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye-bye.
That concludes another episode of the Entrepreneurial Enclave with Kevin Wortham, the podcast that focuses on building, maintaining, pivoting, planning, and investing in you, the entrepreneur. We hope you found this episode informative and enlightening. If you have any questions or comments about any of our episodes, please call 609-731-9311 or email kevin@minding-our-business.com. We look forward to joining us for our next one. Until next time.